My special guest today really needs no introduction because you folks see him every single week out at the wagon. But I wanted Cliff to come in and sit down with me and talk about the chuck wagon because it is the social center of all cowboy life. And Clifford, let's talk a little bit about how the chuck wagon got started, who invented it, and why it became important to our way of life.
Well, if you'll let me go back just a little bit, tell you a story about W.D. and George Reynolds. They're one of the first ones from this area to take cattle west. First they were going to take a herd of cattle into Mexico, but that didn't work out. The market wasn't too good there, so they took the cattle on up into New Mexico. Well, George, called him GT, but he had an advantage over a lot of the other folks. What happened was he volunteered for the Civil War, for the Confederacy at the start of the war. But then he contacted measles, and so he got out in 1863, got better, and so all these cattle were roaming loose and didn't have any income at all. So W.D. and George started gathering up these cattle. And they put that first herd together in October of 1865, which the war just at the end of it. So they followed, with that little herd of cattle, they followed the Butterfield Trail, which came right through Lambshead Ranch, came across the old stripping place right there across the Clear Fork, and they followed that trail and went on out west and just stayed right with that trail to the Horsehead Crossing and took those cattle up the trail. They had pack horses then instead of a chuck wagon. They just carried all the grub with the pack horse because they didn't have that many head of cattle on those first drives. So then in 1866, a year later, is when Charlie Goodnight put his wagon together, and the wagon is credited to Charlie Goodnight, taking an old military wagon, which had a lot of those surplus wagons, right after the Civil War. Converted that, put a chuck box on it, and so he could feed all his crew. And the chuck wagon played such an important role in those cattle drives because it carried all their bedrolls. It was their home away from home. The cook was the doctor, the nurse, the mother, and because those kids were just kids going up the trail. And so Charlie saw that in reading a book called Lambshead Before Interwoven, and told about a lot of those stories, and that Goodnight put his men first, his horses next, and then the cattle. So that's kind of where the chuck wagon originated.
Well, and as we went along and we fenced off the range and we started confining cattle within the boundaries of our property, some of it was still pretty widespread, so we started using the wagon there to feed the cowboys, and sometimes they'd stay out 11 months of the year on the big ranches.
Oh, definitely. I was at the Long X for 15 years and ran that place. But I talked to Jimbo Reynolds, who was out there for a long time. A guy that from here worked out there, Jack Pate. He told about loading up all the cattle, driving them to Abilene, putting all the cattle, horses, men, everything, sending them out west. The wagon, that's all they had out there, was just staying with the wagon 12 months out of the year. And they just continue working the ranch from one end to the other and just stayed with that wagon day in and day out. And that was their home away from home. That's all they had.
Yeah, and it was a social center. Even today, you don't hear a cowboy say, when does the roundup start? And you say, when's the wagon going out?
Yeah, exactly.
And so we try to preserve that by having chuck wagon contests, primarily cooking contests, but also the wagons have to meet a certain criteria. They have to have been able to go up the trail. And those contests have become very popular, Cliff, as you know. And we have a lot of events that have up to 40 wagons. Now, your hometown is Albany.
Right.
And in October, the second weekend in October every year, you're going to have the Texas Chuckwagon Reunion.
Texas Chuckwagon Reunion, and it'll be a celebrity cook-off, seminars. We'll have blacksmith, all different people, wheelwrights, everybody connected with the chuckwagon that enjoy chuckwagon. It'll just be a reunion having fun.
Boy, if you have eating off a chuckwagon, you have eating. And speaking of eating off a chuckwagon, I got a feeling that Bill is madder than a wet hen because you're in here with me and he's having to cook the whole meal by himself. So I better get you out there.
You think so?
Yeah, let's do it.